Optus cable and a Telstra cable running through. It just seems crazy to you think you'd have this one infrastructure and then people would buy off that infrastructure and they'd offer you services. So it'd be like having a couple of roads running or 2 train tracks running side by side, deciding which train you're going to catch. It just doesn't make sense.
That's what happens in the UK.
But they have 2 train tracks running side by side.
No, but they have several trains, and you have to work out whether I've just bought a train or I've bought a Virgin ticket or a British Midlands ticket, and making sure.
Oh, there we go. That sounds good.
We're in business.
We're in business.
Okay. I'll just keep this open just to look out for comments.
Are you on the NBN?
NBN?
Yeah. The NBN, that's the big super fast cable that's going through.
If you go to Joomla Australia, you
Yeah.
100
Thank you.
meg.
Cool.
It's super fast.
Okay, let's get started.
100 meg.
Oh, okay, but it's NBN as opposed to ADSL or something like that.
Yeah, I know.
You're right to get started.
Yeah.
Go on. Thanks, go.
So, today we're going to talk about how to fix it. So, thought it would be a good topic. We haven't talked about this for quite some time, so it's always an interesting topic. So, first of all, you need to recognise your site's hacked, and sometimes it's really obvious. The hackers might replace your homepage with an image like that or something to that effect. But sometimes it's quite subtle, and you don't actually notice anything when you look at your site, and you may not realise that your site's actually hacked. But when you view the source code, you might see some extra things inserted in there that shouldn't be there, some hidden iframes and crypto mining stuff and whatever else. But a notification from your web host to say that your resource usage is high, maybe your CPU usage is 200% over quota, and we're going to ban your account if you don't fix it in 24 hours or something like that. So that's one indication that something's not right on your site. Another indication, you might get a complaint from a customer, maybe something they normally do on your site, they go to do it and it's not working properly, or something different is popping up or whatever. When you're looking at the files in your file manager, you might notice that the date of the last modification of certain files has changed to maybe today's date or yesterday's date or something like that. In particular, the template directory, if you're looking at index.php, that's a very common one that gets changed by a lot of scripts that go through and hack sites. So look out for anything that's unusual there as far as activity. You might suddenly see all these extra users appear on your site when you go into User Manager, and you'll see all these random users that you've never heard of that are suddenly on your site. That can be an indication that it's been hacked. And also sometimes when you go to the site and the browser's just behaving weirdly, like you're clicking on things that's not working, or it's just not behaving as it normally would, that could be an indication that your site's hacked. So once you identify that your site has been hacked, then you need to come up with a plan of what you're going to do. If you're working for a large organisation, you've probably got a disaster recovery plan in place, but for smaller sites, chances are you probably don't have one. So then the next thing to do is to figure out what to do. So depending on the type of hack and how it's impacting your customers, depends on the sort of response you take. Like if you're getting that first screen where it's hacked by such and such, you probably want to take your site down completely and not just share that message. But if it's something a lot more subtle, like you're just seeing all these extra users in your back end, you probably wouldn't want to take down your whole site to fix it. So depending on the severity of the hack and how it's going to impact your customers, you may take the site offline or put in maintenance mode, or you might put in like a HC access rule that just blocks everyone, or you might just replace the index.php with a temporary page or something like that to stop people visiting site while you're fixing it.
Mm-hmm.
An immediate response some people take is to go in and change all their passwords, and sometimes it's appropriate. Maybe you're using a really weak password and they've just happened to brute force and figure out what your admin password is or your cPanel password or something. So changing passwords is worthwhile, but also if someone's hacked into your site and got a copy of your database, they could use some tools to brute force those passwords and figure out what all your passwords are. So it's worth changing the passwords straight away just as a first step. But then after you've cleaned the site, it's worth changing them again, because in that time that you're taking to clean it, maybe your site, your database has been downloaded again or something like that. So the next question you might ask yourself is, why did my site get hacked? And there's lots of reasons why sites get hacked. Sometimes it's someone just wanting to deface the site or vandalise it. Maybe it's a politician they don't like and they want to put a rude message about them or something like that. Maybe they want to spread some malware to infect other sites and visitors, people that come to your site. It could be a hacker just showing off to whoever, just showing how great they are. Look, I can hack into all these sites. A lot of the time it's profit driven, like maybe they're installing a crypto mining software on your site to make them money, to make them cryptocurrency. Or if you're sending out all these Viagra spam messages from your site, they might make some money when people fall for their scam that they're sending out. And also there's a chance that it might be a targeted attack, particularly if you've got sensitive information on your site. Someone might have specifically targeted your site and hacked it just to obtain that personal information. But most of the time it's just really either spreading spam or just someone hacking because they can, not because it's personal. Like the risk of a personal attack is pretty low unless you're upsetting a lot of people, which most people aren't. So once you realise your site's been hacked, a good place to start looking to see how it's been hacked and what it's been affected is look in your control panel and have a look at the raw access logs. And in there it has all the requests that every browser that's come to your site has access. So if you know the site was hacked in the last hour, you can just look at the last hour's worth of messages. If it's been hacked for a couple of days, you might have to go further back. Web hosts generally store an archive copy of those that go back maybe 30 days or something. So I think this might be Sean at the front door. So
Okay, let's go in. Oh, yes. Can I leave on?
That's okay. Yeah. Can I share my experience about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Last month, my host got hacked. Yeah. It was a Friday evening.
Yep.
Yeah. I got an email from Amazon since I developed the website. I developed the host myself. Yeah. Later.
Okay.
So we probably started 5 minutes ago. So.
Okay, sorry guys.
Later.
Okay, yes.
It's very interesting.
Yes, so far we've talked about recognising that your site's been hacked and then sort of the immediate response you might take. So the next thing that we're looking at is to investigate what's been hacked and going from there. So just talking about the raw access logs and control panel, how when you go in there you can see all the different browser requests. Like if it's a really good hack, they may clear those logs and you may not even see that in there. But a lot of the time you'll see all these messages in there that look really suspicious, like that one there, proc/self/environment, that looks really suspicious. And you can see that they're targeting com my files extension in that top one, and the second one there targeting com alpha user points. So obviously there's been a vulnerability in those extensions at some point in time, and they've got a script that's targeting those particular vulnerabilities, just testing every Joomla site that they come across. Oh, does it have this vulnerability? No, does it have this vulnerability? goes through a script and just tests all these different vulnerabilities as possible. So it's worth checking your site and making sure that the extensions that you have running on there are up to date and that they're not listed on the vulnerable extension list. Every time there's a vulnerability identified in an extension, it'll get listed on the vel, and the extension developer will then usually see that notification and fix the issue and release a new version that addresses that. But if you're using an older version that's still vulnerable, it's worth upgrading. In general, it's worth keeping up to date with the latest version of everything anyway, but the vulnerable extension list is a good place to check to make sure that what you're using is up to date. There's the obvious checking your Joomla version, making sure that your core version's up to date. There are some vulnerabilities in the past from Joomla core versions, but not so many recently. Most of the recent ones are very, very minor and unlikely to get your site hacked. It might be just disclosing a bit of information or that sort of thing. But yeah, it's always worth checking to make sure your Joomla site is up to date. Another thing to check is your PHP version. Joomla's now got the nice message in there when you go to the back end. If you're using an old version of PHP, it'll give you that warning message at the top to say that using an outdated version, please update. But you can have a look to see what version of PHP you're running just in your system information on the PHP information tab, and you can see what version of PHP there. If you're using an older version, usually a lot of web hosts in their control panel will give you the option to change the PHP version that you're running. And if they don't, you can just contact the web host and get them to upgrade the PHP version for your site. And as Kate was mentioning earlier on, sometimes you've got some extensions that don't support the newer PHP version. So in that case, you need to identify what those extensions are, figure out do I still need them or not, and if you don't need them, just turn them off, and that's okay. But if you do need them, then you need to get the updated version of the extensions that support the PHP version. Yeah, there has been some vulnerabilities in PHP in the past that can cause sites to be hacked if you're running really old PHP versions. Another thing to check is your own personal computer, the one that you use to access the administrator and cPanel, all that sort of stuff. Make sure that you don't have any malware or viruses on the computer. I once had my computer got infected with some malware, and at the time I was using an FTP program that didn't encrypt the passwords. They're all stored in plain text, and those passwords then got transmitted to someone, and my site got hacked because of that. So making sure that your own personal computer is secure is important too. And also anyone else who accesses the site from an administrative point of view, making sure that they don't get infected with anything as well. So there's free tools like Malwarebytes that you can check for malware, and there's free virus scanners that you can download, or there's paid ones as well, depending on what you're checking. Usually the difference between the paid version and the free version you can just do a once-off scan and it just checks at that point in time, whereas paid versions quite often have something running in the background constantly checking, and as soon as an infection's detected, it'll start popping up and giving you warnings and that sort of stuff. Another thing to consider is there anything else on this hosting account that could have been hacked? Because sometimes it's not the Joomla site itself that's vulnerable, it's something else that's on that hosting account. Like recently the Joomla extension directory was notified that there was a vulnerability, and that was because of Jenkins that they use for the build process that had a library in it that was outdated, that vulnerable to a particular hack. I don't think they were actually hacked, they were just notified that, hey, look, you've got this vulnerable software running on there, and then they took some precautions to upgrade all that. But yeah, there's plenty of examples where you might have multiple websites hosted on the same account, and maybe one's an old site that you've forgotten about that you haven't updated, and then that gets hacked, and once they're into that one site, everything on that hosting account can be accessed. I once had a forum on the site that wasn't Joomla, it was like Simple Machines forum or something like that, and I didn't bother updating that, and that got hacked, and that caused my Joomla site to get hacked. So yeah, you've got to be careful of what else is on your site. Make sure everything's up to date, and regularly review to see what's there, because sometimes there's things you just forget about, and that can be the problem. So one place you can go to see what's been changed or modified is if you go into your file manager in the control panel and have a look and see the dates and times of the files and when they've been modified. You can sort by last modified. And just use an example here. If you see something that's modified today and you haven't done anything, you haven't upgraded your Joomla version and you haven't gone and updated your template or anything, then you know that something else has changed that, and that's a good indication that you've been hacked by someone, because files are changing that you didn't change, so someone else did it. The index.php is a common one inside the template folder that quite often gets hacked. There's other files you can check as well, but if you go through like the root and the template folder and a couple other folders, and just look at the last modified date, that's one way to see what's possibly being affected there. And the other thing to do is check to see if any new files have been uploaded recently, like maybe there's a file there that you don't recognise that has a strange file name that that just shouldn't be there. Maybe that someone's got in through some sort of vulnerability, maybe a PHP vulnerability on your hosting account, they've uploaded a backdoor Trojan sort of thing, and then they'll use that to hack your site sometime in the future. So in this day and age, if you've got any personal or financial information and your site does get hacked, then you need to go through the mandatory data breach notification through the government website. And if you don't, you can get big fines if you get caught not doing that sort of stuff. So it's worth making sure that you do take seriously about storing personal and financial information. Most of you guys, your sites wouldn't be affected by that sort of thing, but anyone doing any financial transactions and storing information on the site, or if they're storing date of births and mother's maiden name and home addresses and that sort of stuff, then it's important to make sure that information is secure and that you report breaches. Depending on the organisation, sometimes you may want to keep a copy of those hacked files to send off to a third party to do further investigation on. Like a lot of large organisations will do that. They'll take a snapshot of the site and before they even start cleaning up anything, just so that they can refer back to that later. Maybe they can try to find out the source of the hack or what they've obtained, and like take a snapshot of all your log files and that sort of thing. That's another thing. For smaller businesses, it's probably not an issue. You probably don't care. So when it comes to recovery, there's a few things that you should consider. First of all, do you have any good backups? When was your last backup? How often do you back up? Do you know when the site was hacked, or have you got no idea? If you know exactly when the site's hacked and you know that you've got a good backup and nothing's changed on the site since then a good recovery strategy would be to delete everything, restore the backup, and then address those vulnerabilities that caused it to get hacked in the first place. If you don't have a good backup, you may want to go through and manually clean the site. But yeah, backups are important in any case. Maybe you might do a combination. You might manually clean some things and you might restore from backup some other portions, depending on what it is. Like maybe your site template hasn't changed for the last 6 months, so you might get a backup from 6 months ago when you know it wasn't infected. Restore that. But your data has changed, so you don't want to restore the content table and delete all the articles, because you lose all that history. Sometimes you need to be aware that when you do go through the process of cleaning it all up and you think you fixed everything and then you come back a day later, it's all been hacked again because you didn't actually find the true source of the hack. Maybe there was multiple points, or maybe there's something you missed. So I've seen that before where I've got to the trouble of cleaning a site. I thought I fixed it, and then the next day, oh crap, it's broken again. So then you've got to do a bit more investigation to find out what's caused it and try to address it. Sometimes manually cleaning the files is a way to go. Like if it's just a simple hack where someone's injected some iframes on your template that's causing redirects to a porn site or something like that, then it may be as simple as just going in and editing those files and deleting the code that's been inserted and saving it again. Or restoring it from backup's an option too, depending on if you've got a good backup or not. But you still need to address what's caused that hack, and if you don't know what's caused it, then there's probably some other steps you can take to try and protect your site. If you think any of the core Joomla files have been affected, then sometimes it's worth reinstalling Joomla over the top, so that it replaces all the core files with the original versions, and you know that they haven't been modified then. Depending on how important the site is and what your skills are like, you may be able to fix it yourself, or you might get to the point where you can't fix it. You need to engage a third party to fix it, and I'll talk about a service that can help you with that if you do get to that point. So looking to see whether you need to change passwords after you've cleaned the site. You may then want to change all the passwords, like the cPanel, the Joomla admin. But things that people forget is like your MySQL password. If people know your database host name and your username and password, even without having access to the rest of your site, they could still get into your database and do some damage. So it may be worth changing your MySQL password as well, which would be a matter of changing it on your web host and updating your configuration.php in there to connect to the new password. If you've got any FTP accounts, change those as well. Although if you can avoid using FTP, that's probably even better. If you are going to connect like that, use SNFTP instead, so that it's encrypted. I don't tend to use FTP much these days anyway. And then it's worth looking to see whether you need to clean up your database, like have all these spammy users been added to your common users table, or has there been some spam links added into some of your content things? Do you need to go through and clean up your database and make sure that you've got rid of all the stuff that's been inserted in there? So if you've been blocked by your web host, maybe you've exceeded your CPU usage or something like that, and they've banned your account, or they're threatening to ban your account. Once you've cleaned it up, it's worth getting in touch with your web host to say, hey, I found this problem, I fixed it, and it's not expected to happen again. And then they will likely remove that ban. Or if they don't remove the ban, like if they haven't banned you but they'll just warn you about resource usage, they may reset your resource usage for that month so that you don't get banned in a couple of days' time when it eventually reaches that threshold. And if your site's been blacklisted for sending spam or blacklisted for having malware or anything like that, you may need to go through Google and some other services to request that your site's removed from those blacklists, and they'll check the site again, see if it's still infected, and if it's not infected, they'll remove it from those blacklists. So as far as tools go, to first of all identify things and clean things up, myjoomla.com, they have an audit service where you can, I think you can do one site for free, and you can do an audit, and it'll go through, check all the site and look for modified core files. It'll look for things that have been inserted in there, like if there's any eval things chucked into your PHP or any sort of suspicious code. It'll go through and identify things that you should look at. But I think it's just a once-off free audit, and then after that it's a subscription service that you pay for. So you can, if you're paying a subscription there, you can use his tools to go through and scan your site and look for problems, and then it'll tell you what you need to fix. He also has a service where he'll fix a hack site for you. I think it's £90 or something like that. It's a once-off fee, and he'll go through and clean it up for you. But then, if you still haven't addressed the original cause of that hack, even if he cleans it up, it may get hacked again. So it's worth trying to figure out what's caused it. Other services like Watchful, they have a malware scan as part of their service, so that's sort of a competitor to my Joomla. They do the website monitoring and allow you to update sites and all that in one console. And they've got a malware scan tool that will go through and scan all the files on your site and look for problems. Some web hosts have malware scanning tools as well, like SiteGround have got that SG site scanner or something that can go through and identify malware on your site and let you know that, hey, look, there's something here that's a bit suspicious. So they're probably the main tools to scan it and look for problems. You could also download a copy of the website locally onto your computer and scan it, like do a text search for certain things that are common in hacks, like HTML and things like that. So once you've cleaned your site and fixed it up, then you probably want to think about how can I make my site better and stop it from being vulnerable to hacks and stuff again. So I highly recommend that you install some sort of firewall software. I use the Keeper admin tools, but other people use RS Firewall, and both are very good products. And even if you're using some extensions that may be vulnerable to some security exploits, by having these firewalls and software in place, it can block some of those common attacks and stop your site from becoming vulnerable. So some other things you can do in your .htaccess file, you can add rules in there that will filter out the queries in the URL and block certain things from happening. Like you can see the first one there, proc/shell/environ. That error log that I showed you before, where there was an extension trying to exploit a vulnerability using that proc self environment, going back directories and trying to execute things. By having this sort of stuff in your htaccess, it'll block those before they even happen and stop those sort of attacks. Like this is just a small sample of things, but you see that base 64 encode, that is quite often used in code that's injected. They'll base 64 encode it so that it just looks like gobbledygook, and so it's like encrypted, and then they'll use a base 64 decoder when they execute it. So things like that can get blocked out just with some htaccess rules. If you Google it, you can find a whole lot of rules to put in there. Or if you're using the Keeper admin tools, they've got a htaccess maker which adds a lot of that stuff in there for you, and that can be good to protect your site.
Can I ask, why wouldn't Joomla put the stuff like automatically put in if it's, why wouldn't it just be added in like those sort of things?
There is a default htaccess file that comes with Joomla, but it doesn't block most sensitive stuff. There might be legitimate reasons why you do want to use base 64 encoding on a site. Maybe you're doing something that it's not always a hack thing. And some of these things, it may break your site by putting on there because you're legitimately using some of these features. But on most sites, you can safely go in and block all this stuff, and it's not going to break anything, and it's going to make the site more secure. It's really down to the individual to decide what security is appropriate for your site. The Joomla project doesn't really provide that type of blocking.
What's the MOS config?
Back in the Joomla 1.5 days, there was a command MOS config that was used to access the global configuration variables and stuff, so I think it's to do with that. So anyway, you should obviously make sure that all your software is up to date, including your core Joomla, all your extensions, your PHP version, any modules that your web host is using, like if it's using Apache Web Server or whatever web server it's running, making sure that they're not running a vulnerable version, and there's certain modules that they may have that they would be constantly checking to make sure that the latest versions. There's third-party security tools you can run on sites to identify what software it's hosted on and it's using, and see what vulnerabilities might exist in some of that stuff. But for the average small site, usually your web host looks after that sort of thing, so you don't have to worry about it. It's only if you're hosting your own sites that you really need to be concerned, and providing your own server and stuff. Limiting who has admin access or super user access to your site is a good idea, because the more people that have access to it, the more chance that their computers might get hacked, or they might have weak passwords, or that sort of thing, or they might log into your site on a shared computer and forget to log out, that sort of thing. So limiting who has access is always a good idea. Doing regular malware scans on your site and your computer is worthwhile, and also regularly reviewing your log files and looking for suspicious activity, and being aware of what your hosting resources' normal usage is, and when it's suddenly changed, because that can be an indication that something's not good there. And just generally looking out for anything that's suspicious, anything that's unusual that doesn't normally happen like that. That could be an indication. And once you've cleaned up your site, it's worth regularly checking to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen again, or that it doesn't get hacked in a different way, and make sure that you haven't missed anything. Make sure your backups are good, and all that sort of stuff. And security is really an ongoing thing. It's not something you do once and forget about it. These sort of vulnerabilities get identified on a regular basis. Maybe the PHP version that we're all using, suddenly they'll find some vulnerability in that, and unless you're constantly reviewing the security of your site and the extensions and all the software, you might miss some of these vulnerabilities that come out and suddenly become vulnerable without even realising it. So it's not just a once-off thing you do, and you should, on a regular basis, at least check the basics as far as security, make sure that your software's up to date, that you're using a firewall of some sort, and that sort of thing. That's about it for the presentation. Do we have any questions here?
The user passwords that are stored for the basic Joomla site,
Yep.
are they stored encrypted?
They are encrypted, but if you've got enough time and computing power, you can crack it.
Or with a rainbow table or something?
Yeah, well, that's one way to crack it,
Yeah.
So if someone's got access to your database, then you have to assume that all the passwords are compromised, and you would tell all your users to change their passwords.
I guess in a shared environment, I've got admin tools for the Joomla website. So, and that reports quite often that various people have made attempts to get to the website /administrator, and they can't do that, and they get blocked in the end, because you can't do that with admin tools. But then it occurs to me, I've also got WordPress websites on that shared account, and so if there's a vulnerability there, that means that they can get to any of the websites. Right?
Yeah. You can get a keeper admin tools for WordPress now too.
Oh, right.
Yeah, this is released recently.
I use WordFence for the live one of the sites, but not all. But not the pro version.
If you're using a WordPress firewall sort of software, it probably does the same sort of thing. I just like using the same software for consistency.
Yes, I use a Kiva backup for.
My internet connection's dropped down. Let me just connect.
For both things, Kiva backup for WordPress and for Joomla.
Yeah, admin tools for WordPress, which is basically the same as the Keeper admin tools, but it's works for WordPress. So, I like using the same software on both platforms, so you only have to learn one thing.
Yeah. Okay. I just paid for word fence. Pro. Oh well, next year.
And there's another +1 for RS firewall, so it's also a good product. Evan, I stopped the live stream.
Thanks for sharing.
Chat.